They came expecting a classic tale of courage, a small band of defenders making a final, desperate stand against overwhelming odds. The story is the sort of thing that fits neatly into a movie trailer. Soldiers on a ruined ridge, families huddled behind boarded doors, a handful of resolute faces against an advancing tide. But what if that heroic last stand was not the spontaneous act of bravery history remembers, but a deliberate stage set by those very commanders who later wrote the epilogue? This is the tale of a last stand that was actually a setup, and why the truth matters more than the myth. Imagine the scene. An isolated garrison cut off from reinforcements. Command has failed, the enemy has superior numbers, and defeat appears inevitable. In the public eye, the defenders choose honor over survival. They refuse to surrender, preferring to fight to the last man. The narrative is simple, morally clear, and it cements reputations. Families are comforted, nations are inspired, memorials are built, generals are lionized. But beneath the marble plaques and stirring speeches, there are often inconvenient facts that point to planning rather than improvisation. First, consider logistics. Most true last stands happen amid confusion. Supply lines are severed, communications dark, orders contradictory. A planned last stand, by contrast, requires forethought. Prearranged positions, rationed ammunition, calculated evacuation routes for non-combatants, and carefully controlled information flows. Historical examinations frequently uncover records and correspondence that show senior officers anticipated the outcome. They positioned troops where survival was unlikely, not by miscalculation, but because the sacrifices served a strategic or political purpose. That leads to motive. Why stage such a thing? Sometimes it is to buy time. A concentrated sacrificial resistance can delay an enemy long enough for a larger force to regroup or for critical political decisions to be made. Sometimes it is to manufacture legitimacy. Governments, under scrutiny, have used dramatic defeats to foster national unity, to redirect public ire, or to sanctify a failing cause. There is also personal ambition. Commanders who face disgrace may choose martyrdom as a way to secure a heroic legacy. In every case, the last stand becomes currency, valuable, manipulable, and immensely persuasive. The human cost is the hardest part to reconcile. Soldiers and civilians pressed into these roles often have little idea they are fulfilling a narrative constructed for others. Their courage is real, no staged. Last stand can fake fear, pain, or sacrifice, but the context can be engineered. Families believe their loved ones died resisting an unjust invader, when in truth some died because higher-ups calculated that their deaths would achieve something deemed greater. The moral calculus is chilling. Lives traded for strategy. Grief weaponized into resolve. Why does this matter now? Because myths shape memory and policy. When societies enshrine staged sacrifices as the purest form of valor, they risk creating incentives for repetition. Future leaders might see glory in engineered heroism, not simply the misfortune of tactical failure. And historians, deprived of full transparency, can be swept into propagating partial truths that feed national narratives instead of illuminating reality. Yet, there is a final paradox worth noting. The staged last stand, even when exposed, does not fully diminish the bravery of those who fought. Their actions remain acts of human courage under terrible circumstances. What changes is how we assign responsibility and learn from the past. Recognizing that some heroic endings were orchestrated is not an exercise in cynicism, but an act of respect. Respect for truth, for the ordinary people who bore the consequences, and for a future that must reckon honestly with the costs of manufactured sacrifice. In the end, the most patriotic act might be the simplest: to remember the dead truthfully, to hold leaders accountable, and to ensure that no sacrifice is made merely to polish an image. Only then can heroism remain what it purports to be: a choice freely made, not a setup carefully staged.